I am Jim Collison, live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 3, recorded on April 6th, 2017. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths themes, one theme at a time, and today's theme is belief. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. Just look down there. There's a login button, bottom left-hand corner. Choose that. Choose the guest account. Put your name in where it says guest and hit submit. You'll be right in the chat room. That will allow you to ask questions live, and we encourage you to do that as we're going through the program. You can also pop that chat room out if you want. Red X's or red boxes in the upper right-hand corner. Select those. It'll just pop it out on your screen. It's also mobile enabled as well. So if you want to follow us, watch us, or listen to us, or chat with us on your mobile device, you can do that as well. If you're listening on the recorded version, you have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. For all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs, you can also catch this video and hundreds of actually videos and audio that we have done. Great learning opportunities for you are available on our coaches blog. You're on it if you're listening to us live, coaching.gallup.com. Maika Leibbrandt is our host today. She works as a learning development consultant, a workplace consultant here at Gallup. And Maika, always great to have you back on a Theme Thursday. Welcome to Theme Thursday.
Thanks, Jim. Best part of my week. I'm so excited about today. You were mentioning in pre-show that this has been our most signed up for, most registered Theme Thursday yet. So pretty exciting stuff happening today.
No, we are excited. We had to postpone this and move it down, and so we're excited to finally get to it. Hopefully, folks have registered and downloaded the companion guide. If you haven't done that, the link to that is right above the video window there if you want to grab it. But Maika, let's walk a little bit through belief.
Yeah, so we're talking execute in season 3, coming to the end of our executing themes, talking specifically about each one of these themes, a deep dive as it relates to leadership. Belief by itself really is about having certain core values that are unchanging. And I will coach leaders all the time who don't have belief, and they'll get tripped up and they'll say, well, does that mean I don't have values? No, I don't think it's an either or, but those leaders who lead with belief, I think, have a closer connection to how values play out in their decision making. It's about purposes, causes, or values that absolutely direct the choices that you make as a leader in your life. These values can be about anything. We don't necessarily identify what those values are, but very often there's an others orientation to it. Similar to, as we talked about responsibility a few weeks ago, being really about that external commitment that you make to people, belief tends to be about what kind of an effect are you making on others. It tends to be a little bit about altruism or about service. And I think that helps us understand belief as an executing theme. It's not just what you think about and what you're drawn to. It actually has some get up and go. It actually has, I think, a bit of an engine to it that drives you to do work that you know aligns with the values that you have internally. Belief can make you very easy to trust. It also demands that you find work that meshes with your values. And as we think about this and what it looks like for a leader, so as an individual contributor, belief might look like you choose to do the things that align with your values. In leadership, it might be that you're leading very obviously with your heart, with a lot of passion, an alignment between your personal values and your organizational causes. I also think as a leader, belief helps you pay attention to passion. I tend to coach people with high belief and find that if you hit the cause or the purpose or the value that is most important to them, and it helps you sort of direct their life. In season 2, when we were talking about belief, I remember getting some feedback from people because I said that very same thing. You know, if you're working with somebody with high belief, ask them to put some voice to those values. Ask them to talk about what those most important missions or purpose or causes are. And I got some feedback from people saying, I have high belief and I'm not sure what those are. Well, what a beautiful example of how you can add skill and awareness to talent in order to bring it to strength. That exercise of being able to name what those values are, of paying attention to when you get most passionate, paying attention to when you feel most like you're aligned between your service to others and your excitement of yourself. So I think that means that as leaders, you can tap into that in other people as well. Stay curious about what is the purpose that other people bring to work every day. Those other people might be employees, they might be peers, they might even be your customers. But a huge benefit of belief is being able to sort of speak the language of passion and notice it in other people. I also think a benefit that belief brings to leadership is, in many cases, it can limit your tolerance of frivolous initiatives. Simply said, leaders with high belief don't have time to play games because there are important things that need to be done. It can bring clarity of purpose to the team or the organization. That's different than what it looks like as perhaps an individual contributor, where it's clarity of your own purpose. The leadership extension is really that stable understanding of what is the most important work that your group or your organization is doing. To grow that, think about communicating this early and often, and especially during times of change, being that compass that helps people remember what our work is translating into. I think it's more about an attitude of service than sometimes we realize. It's definitely more about service in general than ascribing to a certain set of morals or spiritual beliefs. So, getting your team involved in doing something that serves others, or getting your team involved in that experience of feeling a connection to something outside of their day-to-day tasks, can also be an excellent leadership extension of your belief. I also think it's important for leaders to identify behaviors that send a message of acceptance. Sometimes we think about perhaps belief can lead to a great clarity of understanding and a great clarity of alignment. And that could lead to the ability to think about groups who are in the in crowd and groups who maybe are in the out crowd. Be careful that you are going, I think, intentionally out of your way to think about the behaviors that identify acceptance and that communicate an openness for everybody. That could be making sure that you're paying attention to performance and not getting lost in some of the minor things that might get in the way. You definitely know when your values are being affronted, or when you've hit that nerve with high belief. So it makes it all the more important to make sure that you can invite other beliefs into the bigger picture. This season, we're talking about how every theme can play out in terms of fulfilling the needs of followers, and those needs we're going to talk about real quickly here. A leader with belief might use that theme to build trust by clearly outlining the behaviors that they will expect, as well as those behaviors that they will not tolerate. I think when you live on a strong foundation of values and you live on a strong commitment to purpose, then perhaps you've got an easier time understanding the kind of behaviors that jive with that and the kinds that don't. So build trust just by introducing that before you have to get out in front of it, before you have to do any damage control afterwards. Leaders with belief might build stability by bringing values into your relationship. Spend some time with those people who share your beliefs. Spend time with people who also don't, and invite that opportunity to talk about, where are we passionate? Where are we purposeful? You can also build stability by ensuring that you're fighting for something. Think about loaning your passion to other people who might need it. That leadership voice can be powerful, speaking on behalf of causes and purposes that you believe in, but that might benefit others more directly than they benefit yourself. Belief might use it to show compassion by talking with others about what's most meaningful in their lives. I also think, depending on what kind of level of influence you have as a leader, a compassionate execution of belief can be to change rules that don't align with people's purpose. I'd say, are there any changes that need to be made? I think about a great leader with belief being able to sort between what absolutely is hard and fast rules that build who we are as an organization, and what are some rules that are just there for the sake of rules, and being flexible and showing compassionate around those that maybe don't lead to the most important outcomes. And finally, a leader might use belief to inspire hope by reminding people what's so important about the work that they're doing. Practice speaking on your convictions about the change that you're going to make into the future. We often use the word impact quite a lot. And I think about that as being a shortened way of saying, how are we affecting the lives of other people? And I think that people with high belief have that sort of strong conviction, that strong passion about them, and it can be an excellent vehicle for really inspiring hope in other people. Take you through the front page of our companion guide, really talking about belief. It's my job to make sure that this language that we call common as strengths coaches is indeed common. So that's just a look at belief and what it looks like perhaps in a leader. And at this point, I'm thrilled to bring in a real inspiring leader in my life. We've got Jane Miller, the COO of Gallup. Jane, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Maika.
Jane, would you mind just introducing us? I've got your top 5 here: self-assurance, individualization, belief, focus, and maximizer. Would you give us a peek into your world and where belief lives for you?
Well, on many days, belief might be my strongest strength. And so as you described it, Maika, I was like, maybe you should just keep talking because you so perfectly articulated everything that I live and breathe as it relates to belief. But I also had a little bit of empathy when you first said that one person said they didn't quite know what belief looked like. I remember vividly 20 or 30 years ago saying, but what? I don't really know what my belief is. How could that possibly be that it would be in my top 5? Because I've seen it show up in various ways through the few decades that I've been working. And yet what that means is it's so second nature to some of us that sometimes it's hard to actually articulate. But boy, once we hit on it, we know exactly what that mission, that purpose, or that passion is. And then, boy, it just, it's like a fire hose.
What did it take for you to get there, that ability to name what those beliefs are?
Oh, I think time and talking about it. If I look back 20 or 30 years ago, it was managing various teams and seeing that teams were more likely to follow when they had, to coin a common or cliche phrase, a true north. I feel like I have a locus of control within me. And so when I can see where we're going, whether it's a little bit of also futurism that begins to appear, but combined with that belief, others are more likely to follow because, to your point earlier, they see a stability, a predictability, and a trust because you're consistent in what you see and you're consistent in what you say and in what executes. And maybe that's the most important part, is how it all comes to fruition over time. And as you begin to see that repetition, as with anything, repetition then causes more perfection, more excellence, more maximization, then people want to be a part of it. So belief plays out in many different ways.
Can you give us, I know that no day is the same in your life, but can you give us just a picture of what belief looks like for you day to day?
Well, so the last 2 days I was in New York and Philadelphia working with CHROs of very large organizations. And the way I introduced those 2 days was I said, I have a day job where I focus on employee associate performance, customer growth, customer retention, and the shareholder value and mission and purpose and sustainability of our organization. But today, meaning Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm actually just doing my hot button and mission and purpose of women and work. So when I look at the different things that I'm passionate about, it can change exactly what a day looks like at any point in time. To your point earlier, today has been an all execution day outside of this hour, where I'm looking at how do we execute things faster. And I'm thinking through what is it that we are as an organization in trying to build out more for our clients, and how do we drive that belief forward so clients can see our mission and helping them achieve their mission as it relates to everything exceptional workplaces.
You're right. Maybe belief is so ingrained in you that it that it would be difficult to align, because even just the words that you're using are so obviously connected to something bigger, something deeper, a bigger purpose. How does belief help you lead other people?
Again, I think it's a locus of control. So as I think through what we as an organization need to accomplish in employee performance and employee retention and an overarching culture that creates a tremendous place to work, we not only want to do that for Gallup. It's selfish to think that it's just Gallup, but really what we want to do that is for the 4,000 organizations we work with today, and then potentially another 4,000 organizations over time. So that belief is always thinking about how do we create an exceptional workplace for Gallup that then can be multiplied across thousands of workplaces so that humans can go to work in places that are exceptional, where they are allowed to bring their whole self to work on a daily basis.
Jane, we have the opportunity to watch you do this every day, so we're kind of in an advantage. But back in 2009, when the economy turned and it got tense in business, and you led us through that, that kind of turmoil, the financial turmoil. Of course, the companies around us were in turmoil. As Maika was talking about belief, I heard a lot of that. Being able to lead through chaos, being able to lead through difficult times. Can you talk about, as a leader, using belief, how do you add stability? When you think about us, how do you go about it so it adds stability to our workplace, even in uncertain times?
It's interesting. I don't have communication in my top 20 even, and I think that belief is my communication. And I think that the more you can build trust with those closest to you, and then help them build trust with those that they're closest to, and have a common, consistent, congruent message, and really assure that people are aligned on where we need to go, again, the execution begins to follow. So when you can see where the future needs to be, and the belief is there as it relates to the type of management, leadership, and communication that needs to be in place so people feel good about the job and their own future, it really all cascades. It all works.
Did you find in that time of chaos that you had to up your communication, even though, self-admittedly communication's low? Did you find you had to do more communication to create that stability, or to create those messages that need to be said when we were in turmoil?
Yes, absolutely. And, the same has been true in talking with the CHROs over the last 2 days, really coming off of the election. And what we found is the best organizations were the ones where a leader, it could be a CEO, a COO, a CHRO, anyone, where they were communicating the emotional aspect and the values aspect of what the election was doing while remaining diplomatic and not taking sides, but helping people understand that, regardless of where we are, we're all going to be okay. As a company, we're going to be okay. As a country, we're going to be okay. So whether it was 2008, 2009, or whether it's been through the election and as a result of the election, I think when there's a belief factor, you help provide a security, you help provide a stability, and you help provide that predictability, which then in and of that self lends itself towards the hope and optimism that people can kind of take a deep breath and go, okay, phew, we're going to be okay. So there are times when I think that self-assurance and belief are so closely connected that really my self-assurance pulls out of belief more than it does its traditional definition.
Well, in the chat room too, would want to add focus, and they hear in a lot of the things that you're saying, that high focus. And I think your focus, belief, self-assurance leads to a lot of that stability as well. And maybe the outcome, does the outcome of that for the employees here at Gallup and for the folks that we work with outside, does that lead to hope in a lot of ways? Do you see that? In other words, because we provide the stability, there's this element of hope that, hey, my job's going to stay around, or there's going to be some things available for me. Do you think about that hope component when you're thinking about how you lead?
All the time. And whether it shows up in engagement, whether it shows up in retention, whether it shows up in performance, whether it shows up in a third-party evaluation we continually knock it out of the park in some of the most difficult attributes there are. And I think that really is in play relative to our team of managers and our team of leaders as they think about where we're going and what that true north is and how you help people come along to a brighter future.
Jane, I love the point that you made about having low communication, because I think that maybe the difference between belief and communication is constantly adjusting based on what other people need, thinking about how can you say something that'll land in the right way with the right audience. When you look at your combination of belief and individualization, it seems, and that self-assurance bit, it seems like it's more about aligning to what's within you and then working that outward, with that individualization piece, being able to make sure that things land. My question for you, Jane, is, are there times when you know that your belief is needed, whether that's in all-day meetings like today or even when you're talking to other leaders? Are there moments where you feel like what's being asked for is your belief?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that one of the jobs of leaders and managers is to provide direction that helps create decisions. And so I think that that belief helps make sense of experience. And belief really becomes the why behind everything we do. So whether it's a daily tactical decision or whether it's a long-term strategic decision, belief really counters to, are we making the right decision and why are we doing this? And one of the things that I try to impress upon all go-tos too is that it's really important to always be explaining the why and making sense of that experience for who that individual is, so the individual can get behind it and so they can better see what the future is. Or even if there is a disappointment, that they understand if and how and where they do fit into that decision, or if it has nothing to do with them and maybe it's another part of an organization. But I think belief is always, always explaining the why behind the bigger decision and helping people feel comfortable with it.
Do you
Jane,
ever have to do that for yourself?
Oh,
How do you prioritize where to go deep and explain the why, and where to let other people manage?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yes. I mean, and there are times when you just have to walk away and say that's something that somebody needs to literally figure out on their own. Because I think that that's one way that then people learn, develop, grow, is by figuring some of it out on their own without being explained or told or taught.
Jane, you mentioned the word go-to, and I should just translate that for folks. We call those our managers. So a lot of times we say go-to, so you can replace those words interchangeably. Judy was asking in the chat room, how do you manage relationships with those that you work with that have different beliefs?
Well, I think it's very important from a strengths perspective to think through what those different beliefs are. So, for example, with the election, I've tried to impress upon people that we all come to the table with very different beliefs, whether it's religious based, whether it's gender, sexual orientation, where we grew up, our education. And the more we embrace those different beliefs, the more important it is. So that's a really important question, Jim, because I think one of the things I love is understanding different people's beliefs. And I think that we need to make sure that we're accepting, but that we can also have healthy, trustworthy debates about things at times, because conflict can provide clarity in terms of who each of us are from a strengths perspective. And as long as it's respectful, I think it's a very important thing to do.
And then Kevin asked this question, what does belief look like when you have to downsize or lay people off? Kind of back to our 2009 example. It was a lot of chaos in those days. And how does your belief kind of handle that? And it'll mix with other themes as well, but how do you handle those downsizing
Well, fortunately,
times?
that's the only time we've had to deal with it. And the whole world, or at least the entire United States, was dealing with it at that point in time. And I think a lot of it comes back to, why are we doing this? And the why was the sustainability of the organization. So we had sustainability for our customers. And in thinking about that sustainability and then explaining where the company was and which areas, had the most success and needed the change, or didn't need the change, and which areas were not having the success and needed the change, you're more likely to be able to help people feel okay about the greater good of the organization and its impact on its customers if you can really talk through the belief aspects of why you're making a decision. So in the case of downsizing, it would have been all around helping people think about where they do or don't fit in to each of those different aspects, and where their strengths are, and where they can play better in another area is a very important part of it. But fortunately, that was short-lived, and we haven't had to go back to that. So.
And then how do you manage, and Sarah asked this question in the chat room, when you have this strong belief that something, you're moving in the right direction, you're doing the right things, this is exactly what needs to be done, but that's viewed out of reality. You might be the one of the few who have, we need to go this direction. I'm sure you've come across that in your leadership. How do you handle that? How have you handled that?
Well, it's hard, but belief presents itself with some level of persistence. So because you have that locus of control, you just kind of keep going. There are times when you have to put your common sense hat on and say, I am odd woman out, and I need to back off. I need to slow down. I need to redirect. But that doesn't mean that, you might go quiet for a while, but you might come back up with it again in 6 months. You might come back up with it again in a year. But there is a quiet persistence that can continue with it. And there are times when I say to myself, one of my favorite sayings is, choose your battles wisely. And my other favorite saying is, know what you can control, and the wisdom to know the difference of what I can't think of what it's called right now.
What you can and what you can, and
Yeah,
the
that
wisdom
one.
to do.
So
Yeah.
you have to know when you really can't create change and you have to back off. And then you also have to know when you just have to fight like hell and keep going.
Yeah, and Carol Ann says, so what if if you're dealing with someone and you have opposite beliefs, but you're supposed to be heading in the same direction? As a leader, how do you handle that?
You continue to talk through it, and you really try to understand who they are, where they're coming from. I mean, that's really the individualization aspect that plays into belief. And so it's asking them all kinds of questions about, why they feel the way they feel, so that you can begin to get to the point of either consensus or agreeing to disagree.
A clarity. It sounds, and
Yes,
I think
clarity.
back to that piece around showing compassion, as part of that is giving people a platform to talk about who they are and establishing the understanding of we might be coming from different places, but at least we know that.
Yes.
I'm curious, Jane, about collaboration. So part of getting higher and higher in leadership means that you feel very often like you have to do it all. But are there great partners who fill in some of your gaps and allow you to be stronger in who you are because they can be stronger in who they are? What's a great partner look like for you?
I store my knowledge in my friends, and I also, through individualization, have just great belief, maybe it's belief more so, that I hire great people. And so, yes, I rely heavily, not only on my direct reports, but all of exec committee, the entire company, because I think we hire so well. And my expectation is that you're able to delegate so that people can do what they do best and have the opportunity to do what they do best by utilizing their strengths. But with my belief, sometimes it can come across stubborn, and I know that. And so I need someone to almost soften it. So I have, there are different people who are really, really good at translating. And one of the things I'm talking about a lot is, are you translating, are you transposing that message to really help that individual or that team best understand how it impacts or affects them? Because otherwise, if they only see it at the conceptual level from a belief standpoint and they aren't very good at translating, the message can just land very flat. So it's really important that we have people thinking about what's best for the individual, the company, and our clients, and being able to translate that message.
It's such a sort of strategy angle of belief. It's a real, I think, thoughtfulness and the commitment to listen so that we know exactly what our why is and how that's moving forward. Let's say that you are advising other leaders with high belief. What would you suggest? What do you feel like you understand today about belief that you'd like to share with other people who also have that theme?
Well, I think the good side and the maybe downside would be that in a lot of cases we know what we want, and again, people will sometimes mix that up with self-assurance, but it's as much or more so belief. And so I think leaders have to be very cognizant that they need to still take into account other people's opinions and then be able to make their best decision based on all the data, all the facts. So whether it's through the depths of analytics, whether it's through the depths of other people's opinions and it's qualitative, mixing and matching all those different aspects before you crack off the decision too fast. Because just because you have a belief doesn't mean it's necessarily the right direction. And so it's really trying to combine the best of all worlds to make the best data-driven decision, while also knowing that with that locus of control, you've probably got a pretty good idea of where we need to go.
Have you always felt that way? Can you think about maybe what belief looked like even in you as a child?
I think so, because I knew what I wanted to be since I was, I don't know, grade school or middle school. So in some form, I think belief has probably always been a part of me.
Excellent.
Jane, you have a statement. You made it earlier, and actually, you taught me this in the time that I've been here. And I think you say conflict creates clarity, and I've kind of morphed that a little bit into chaos creates clarity, because I think, both are true. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a fundamental part of your leadership and your management style, and seeing how sometimes in organizations, the conflict between us isn't a bad thing, right? It sorts some things out. Can you talk, how does that play into your belief, and how do you use that as a leader to really create clarity in an organization?
I guess I kind of like when things are messy or chaotic, because I can get in there and begin to figure out where it can quickly be streamlined. And so I'm not positive, though, as you say that might be more focused than it is belief. I mean, I'm sure there are things rooted underneath it. But yeah, I think that that chaos is actually a fun way to say, here's what we can wrap together. I would actually say it's a little bit of maximization too, and streamline and make it more efficient, as much as it is belief. I'm thinking through that. I'm not quite sure on that one.
No, I love the conflict even in yourself there as you're kind of working through those pieces together. I think as leaders, we need to do that ourselves, where it doesn't just become a single word definition for each one of these for us, but how they play together in this sweet harmony of of action.
So here's another.
Go ahead.
I was just saying another funny thing to asking that question about conflict or chaos is that one time my team made me a book of Jane-isms. And I think one of the things that occurs with belief is you have a lot of common sayings. So I have one that people repeat over and over. Average is only useful in relation to excellence. Or conflict causes clarity. I store my knowledge in my friends. Some I made up. Some are ones that I've taken from other places. But I think sometimes those sayings are things that help people quickly get back on the same track and say, okay, I got it. Now here's where we're going. Because otherwise the chaos will continue. If you don't focus, and maybe it's focusing through belief and pull people back together, then you don't gain traction to complete a task, to execute, or to drive outcomes. And really, we're all here, regardless of where we work or what we do, we all have to drive outcomes. And that belief continues to say, here's what it's going to take to get us from point A to point B.
So, Jane, I'm curious because it seems like belief in many ways could be this set of values that's unchanging, which in many cases might sound like a person is unchanging. But here you are on the cutting edge of helping people understand women in the workplace and how our workplaces need to morph and change and grow with times and with changing demands. How does belief translate into hope, or how does belief really handle things that need to change?
I'm going to take that question a little bit different, but one of the things that I think has been fun is as I think about working with our researchers, and I'll just use the women research for example, when you kind of have a gut feel on something because of belief or because of values, it means you dig into the research at a different level in terms of taking a hypothesis from experience after 30 years of work and saying, now let's look about how that might play out in a database of 3 million people. Or 365,000 people. So there are beliefs that we can actually test to better understand how society thinks. And that part is very, very fun. So there's some parts of our women's research, for example, that in other cases, because everybody does women's research, but they don't get very deep. Belief and values allow you to ask some harder questions and get deeper or peel back the onion so that you can see what's underneath it all relative to what people really feel. So that's where maybe the heart or the feel or the empathy part comes in to belief, because you're really thinking about what's out there and what's occurring beyond the surface.
Does that mean you have to be picky about what you dig into? Does it come back to changing your, looking at your perspective by choosing your battles, or?
Focus and maximizer keeps it pretty reined in.
Yeah. I wondered if we were hearing a little bit of maximizer there, but I like that idea that belief certainly just gives you a different lens because you care about it. So you look at it differently.
And one other thing that I thought about when you asked the question earlier, I wrote an activated values, a set of what new associates can expect from their managers and from Gallup. That was written in 1998. So it's almost 20 years old and we still use it today. So it stood the test of time in terms of helping new associates and managers understand what they can expect of each other collectively, not just of what a manager is supposed to do, or not just of what an employee or associate is supposed to do, but really how that partnership creates a power of two that really helps form not only the expectations, but what the performance and the outcomes can be. And that was all centered around values. So it's activated values in how we live out what we do every single day as as individuals, but also as an organization.
I think to jump in here, Jim, I think I just understood something about belief I'd never thought about, which is when you're focusing on values and on serving others, that there's a timelessness to it, that you don't get caught up in fads.
Definitely. I do not get caught up in fads. But if we begin to see something in data and research that's projecting the future in terms of the long-term sustainability, then we can begin to see what's coming. But fads drive me crazy.
You went right where I was hoping you'd go. I was going to ask about values and how important they are in the way you sort when you think about your values. We talked about long term. Maureen asked though in a question in the chat room. She says, "Can you talk a little bit about maybe a really a highlight reel for you when we think about belief and at a time in your leadership where you were using it or were able to use it or where it really shined, and then maybe she said a Homer Simpson moment, right, where or maybe it got you in a little bit of hot water."
Well, I think, and Jim, maybe you use the word chaos, but I think it's the most difficult situations. Belief is courage or command for me too. So I think when you really need to step up and have courage to make some tough decisions and be able to bring people along on decisions that aren't popular, that's where belief has the greatest benefit. So 15 years ago, we told 500 people we were going to move 50 miles up the road. Well, what that meant from a commute standpoint, a living, families, people really said, wait a second, but what about me? And yet we had to say, in order for you to have a job, this is better for our organization, this is better for our clients. So really it helps you actually have a better future. We need you to come along. But it was not a popular decision. Or to your point, Jim, in 2008 and 2009, not a popular decision. But you've got to have a bigger picture to why those hard decisions are occurring. And it can happen every day in smaller quantities. I think also with the women's report, there's some things that are not popular at all. They're very controversial. And some people really want to debate that. But when you say there's 3 million people behind this, there's 365 people behind this, 16 million behind this, then pretty soon people go, oh, okay, you can say the controversial things. So belief allows you to say some really hard things on an individual basis and on a macro basis to associates, as well as to clients, as well as to society in large groups. And the Homer Simpson, I'm sure I've had a million of them. Right now, I'm not thinking of what it is, but I know I've had them.
It's sometimes it's hard to think along those lines, but let me go off topic for just a minute, because we get a unique opportunity to ask you this question, because your dad was Don Clifton, and I get this question all the time about what was his top 5. What was it like as a child growing up in a household where during those times he is flushing out and researching and really thinking through? You grew up as this idea of positive psychology and strengths was being born. What was that like? Can you talk a little bit about that? I think that's an interesting perspective.
I always jokingly say I was a lab rat. So I'm sure all 4 of us were, but because I was a trailer by quite a ways, I might have been the biggest lab rat of all. He worked all the time. So he wasn't around much. As a matter of fact, I remember dropping him off at the airport on Sundays, picking him up on Fridays. But his presence was larger than life, as it is today, literally. And so in terms of his expectations, in terms of his kindness, what I remember is that I had a very different dad than my friends because he saw the world so differently. So as you know, one of the things I said to you two, that sometimes it's actually caused me a little bit of, insecurity with self-assurance. Number one, let me just say that, is that in our database of 16 million, there are only 8 people who have my same top 5 in their top 5, not even in order, just those same top 5. So sometimes I feel like odd man, odd woman out. And I think that when I look back at Dad and all that he fought through, because people thought, strengths and selection and talent were crazy in the 50s and 60s. They didn't understand it. So as the child, I just admire him and love him and think the world of everything he's doing. And yet you've got all these critics around you growing up in school, high school and college, saying, what is that crazy science? That's not real. So, you fight through what it really is and the research behind it and the science and the importance of it. So even today, when people are talking about all the things their kids don't do well, my belief just like oozes out, and I have to be careful in how I say it in a loving way to say, but what do they do well? What are the most important things that you see in that child that they can do when they graduate high school or when they graduate college? And that's really what, Dad not only not only is that in us from a work standpoint, but it's in us from, every bit of our families too, in terms of thinking about everything people do well. So even when we've got somebody that may be what I call on the bubble here that's not working out, we come back and go, but what do they do well? So whether they stay at Gallup or whether we help them move on to another career, we're always painting what the best is in that person. And so really my belief as it relates to strengths couldn't be stronger, because it's just, I don't see anything but strengths. So when people say, how did you grow up that way? I don't know any different. That's all I know.
Jim and I, before you joined today, Jane, we were talking about how cool it is to get to talk to people at Gallup because they speak strengths as if it's their first language. And I think about, when I think about you and the delight that we've had of having you on today, it helps me illustrate what it truly means to have a belief in talent. And I think that there's absolutely, whether it was nature or nurture, an intrinsic link between high belief as a StrengthsFinder theme and belief in people and belief in strengths. And the fact that you couldn't recall a Homer Simpson moment, I think shows us that your neural pathways literally don't work in a way that would focus on those bad moments as much as you'd be able to recall the highlight reel of those great times. So it's a great, very honest, I think, look into who you are at your core, and we're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Jane, one more question for the community, just as we think, because it's an awesome opportunity to have you on and to think about this. We have these thousands of coaches and millions of people who've taken StrengthsFinder, and as we think about the future of strengths and where we're going with this from a global perspective, in relation to your belief as the leader, as our leader, and what we're doing here, what kind of admiration, what kind of hope as we think about the future as they listen to this?
Well, so I said this last year at the summit, and I mean it, because when I first found out I had self-assurance, I went running over to his office, to Dad's office, late 90s. And I said, I don't have self-assurance. This isn't me. I don't understand this. And he looked up from his desk and he said, it absolutely is you. Let's talk about what it really means. And by the way, I used to debate him on both harmony and self-assurance on the titling of those. So let me just tell you where it was. He said, self-assurance isn't that you think you're the greatest thing. It's not that it's arrogance. And boy, people still don't understand this one, by the way. It's really that you can let go of what you don't do well and think more about what you can do well. So back on the question about gaps, I'm all about, I know a lot of things I don't do well. There's a ton I don't do well. So I hire for strengths and talent to fill in all those gaps, to make sure that all those people can do and have the opportunity to do what they do best. So when I think about self-assurance and belief and maximizer, hang with me, I know your question's a little bit different than that. In a perfect world, strengths would help more and more people have self-assurance 20 or 30 years from now, because more parents would see what kids do well. Because at the end of the day, it's really helping people be self-assured in what they do well and what they don't do well. So if we had more parents, nature and nurture both, because obviously some of it's just who you are, helping kids see the good in them, I think we would have more people getting into careers that were a right fit for them. We were just having a long dialogue on education from K through 12 through higher ed, and how so many parents and so many guidance counselors expect kids to be physicians, attorneys on Wall Street. And there's maybe 5% that are going to be in those positions. And yet we're cramming 75% of the population there because we aren't really thinking about who each human and each child is and what they can do best in life. So the more we help people think through that everybody does something well, find it. And what if we studied what is right with people instead of what is wrong with people, we would help more people have great lives. It's that simple. Great work lives, great school lives, and great lives at home. And that's one of the things he used to come home and say all the time. What if we help make workplaces better? Because that's where people spend the majority of their time. So then ultimately people had better lives. And when I think about belief, that's what we're trying to do every single day. We're trying to make not just Gallup great, because that's selfish. We're trying to make 4,000, 10,000, or maybe someday 1 million companies or 1 billion people understand their strengths so they have the opportunity to do what they do best at work and in life every single day. And if you want to play it out one more step, we have a problem with men between 45 and 55. Our economists just did a report on it the other day. They're dying at much earlier ages because of suicide and because of opioid overdoses. We have drug epidemics in colleges and universities. Kids are taking too much drugs, either prescription or non-prescription. If we help people think about when they're their best and who they are as their best, we begin to turn literally the world around. And we don't have so many of those problems. So it starts with strengths. It helps maximize what a human can do in education and what they choose as a career. and then ultimately in their workplace and long-term, their well-being. And when they're 70, 80, or 90, they can say they've had a great or better life than they would have had they not discovered or known strengths. That's a lot of belief.
No, took the words right out of my mouth. And that, my friends, is belief.
just drop the mic, Jane, and let's call it a day. Maika, let's wrap it, and thank Jane for coming.
Jane, that's belief. That's belief. I find more and more that I just want to shake up things a little bit by helping people truly be strengths-based. Sometimes, even though we're using Clifton Strengths, we like to use it to talk about what's good and bad. And sometimes I feel like the weight of the conversation goes toward vulnerability rather than ability and capability. And I think what you help us remember is that there's so much more power in really, really focusing on the potential. So thanks for helping my life be better. Your leadership has certainly made it possible for me to focus on and understand what I do well and what I don't do well. So thank you on a personal note from that, but also just for giving us a look into your own leadership, your own strengths, and your own belief. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Great to have you, Jane. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just GallupStrengthCenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. If you'd like to be a guest blogger, we consider those as well. If you got 400 to 600 words or an idea in your head, we've got some space on our coaches blog for that. Send it to us in an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line, and that will get over to Maika for consideration. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones on our coaches blog. Really, all the links to all our resources are on our coaches blog. That's one of the sites you should have bookmarked, coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, you can also see a complete list of all the courses that lead to certification on our courses page. Not really hard to remember, courses.gallup.com. Don't forget that we also have other podcasts available for you. If you're thinking about becoming a coach, we have one called Called to Coach, that if you just look in your podcast app or search on the web, Gallup Called to Coach, those programs are available for you as well. If you found this helpful, and this one was super helpful, we'd ask that you'd share it, and want to thank everyone for joining us today. And with that, we'll look forward to the next Call to Coach, and we'll say goodbye, everybody.